Tonight, boom times. The rich keep getting richer, and today we all got poorer. Will interest rates ever come down? Replacing Kamala.
We need you to be Mamala of the country.
With new questions about whether he can make it another 4 years. Should Joe Biden pick another running mate? And the Widowmaker. The V-22 Osprey keeps crashing. Who's responsible for 30 years of paying Boeing billions of dollars and getting dead Americans in return? Welcome to the fairest show on television. We start tonight with bad news about the thing you say is most important to you, and that's the economy. It's the economy, stupid. To be fair, by most measures, the economy is doing well. Look at unemployment, low. Inflation right now, low. The stock market, way up. The economy is good. We as consumers, our personal economy is terrible. And we're going to have to wait a lot longer for our personal economy to get any better. Not only are prices continuing to go up, and they are, the Federal Reserve says they are going up too much to lower interest rates. You may not have known this, but you almost got a pay raise today. If the Federal Reserve lowered rates, if they had decided to do that today, then your car payment, your house payment, credit card payments, everything goes down. It gets cheaper to borrow money. Because of the new inflation data, the Federal Reserve will only cut rates once this year, and who knows? They may not cut them at all. Inflation is the rate prices go up. May, depending on how you cut it, inflation was 0% for the month. But that doesn't mean prices are going down or going back to where they were. Under the Biden administration, prices are up big. Groceries up 21%, K through 12 food 65%, electricity 29%, airfare 40%. The whole list goes on. And yes, wages are up a little bit, but not anywhere near that. So people feel poorer. We all don't have as much money to spend. You have to make a lot more money just to live the same way you lived. I have an economics degree, so I could talk for hours about rate cuts and monetary policy and the stock market and the like. We're not going to do that because right now, none of that matters. What matters is how everybody feels. We all feel poor. And 55% of Americans say the economy is the most important issue this November. So the longer the Federal Reserve keeps interest rates high, the poorer we all feel. The higher our credit card bills are, we can't refinance a mortgage, the list goes on. Harder to buy a house. That's bad news for all of us, and it's also bad news for Joe Biden. Jared Bernstein is with us, Chief Economic Advisor to President Biden. Mr. Bernstein, welcome back to the program. Is the Fed going to be the reason that Donald... it's good to be with you. Is the Fed the reason, the Federal Reserve, the reason that Donald Trump might get reelected?
Well, certainly I don't speak about either Federal Reserve policy or electoral politics. I'm out here to talk about the economy, which is a special pleasure on a day when the consumer price index came in at 0 in the month of May. And, of course, that follows a jobs report where we had 272,000 jobs for May. So strong job growth. We had flat price growth. Price of gas down. Price of groceries down over the past few months. So that's the kind of economic indicators that I'm focusing on behalf of working American households.
All right, the things you like to be talking about. Americans not feeling the stronger economy. 56% believe we are in a recession. I know you will tell me we are not. I would agree with you. 58% say the economy is getting worse. And the reason for that is price increases under President Biden. Gas, we can debate about. Groceries up 20%, eating out 22%, baby food 28.4%. K through 12 food, 65%, pet food, 23%, rent, 20%, electricity, 29%, and the list goes on. How does it work that the Biden administration, and we've talked about this before, not take any responsibility for those numbers?
Well, I completely reject the premise of the question. And in fact, let me drill down on some of the numbers you've mentioned. First of all, it's always a mistake to just cite the inflation side of the equation without also citing, and you need both, not just one, the wage or the income side of the equation. So over the past year, inflation is up 3.3%, and wages are up 4.2% for middle wage workers. That's the 15th month in a row, 15th month in a row that yearly wages for middle wage workers have beaten prices. You mentioned the price of gas. You said we could debate it. Well, we could debate it, or we could just look at the AAA website. That's one mouse click away, and it tells you that the gas price is 14 cents per gallon lower today than it was a year ago. Now, our work is not done, and this is why your question is I think, inaccurate given the president's aggressive cost-cutting agenda. He's lowered the price of insulin. He's lowered the cost of prescription drugs. He's gone after junk fees and successfully done so. We have plans to lower the cost of housing, to lower the cost of child care. So no way are we kicking back and just saying, hey, look at the job market. We're recognizing that households are still struggling with prices that are too high, and we're working to help them with that problem.
Okay, so then why is it that voters trust Donald Trump more on the economy than they trust Joe Biden? And why is it that voters overwhelmingly say that they were better off 4 years ago than they are now?
Well, first of all, let's think about where we are. 2024, go back 4 years. If I'm doing my math right, that's 2020. Of course, that was in the midst of the pandemic, where the prior administration was doing a particularly bad job of getting the vaccine out to people. This president got here, ramped up that program, passed the rescue plan, and lo and behold, the unemployment rate got back to the low levels that have prevailed since then. Right away, families and businesses got to the other side of the crisis. Now, when it comes to polling, I think you have to be careful. If you ask people about their personal financial conditions, many of them will say they're pretty good. If you ask them about broader questions, you're right. You're going to pick up some negativity. And look, some of that is probably partisanship, and a lot of it has to do with exactly what we were talking a minute ago. Prices are still too high. The president says so every time he talks about it, and that's why he's lowering the cost of health care, lowering the cost of prescription drugs, plans for lowering the cost of
I get all that, and I get the idea that those are the things that you all think are going to lower prices on groceries and prices on travel and prices on rent. I get the argument, and solar panels to help people save energy costs is great, but this is what the president said about inflation, about rising prices back in July 2021. Take a listen.
Our experts believe, and the data shows, that most of the price increases we've seen were expected and are expected to be temporary.
And you said something very similar, which turned out, I think we can all agree, in retrospect, inflation was not temporary. It was not transitory. It was very real. It's been endemic. It's been systemic. We've had to raise interest rates significantly to deal with it. If your experts and advisors got it so wrong in 2021, how are we, the American people, to believe that your prescription for solving it now is right in 2024?
Well, look, I disagree with your assessment of that argument, and I disagree with your assessment of what we said and how it turned out. I mean, in fact, okay, that's what I'm going to explain. Inflation went up to 9.1% in June of 2022. This morning, it was 3.3%. Correct me if I'm wrong, but that sounds like about a 60% decline in the rate of inflation. If we look at grocery inflation, so important to American households, it was 1% before the pandemic. Do you know what it was this morning? 1%. That is a round trip. That's very consistent with the things we were saying back then. But I am not the least bit interested in rehashing that argument. What I'm interested in is doing the president's work to lower costs on behalf of today's households. And that's what we're trying to do in all of the areas you and I have been discussing today. And we're just not going to stop until we get there. And by the way, you heard the president talk to retailers saying, stop raising your prices and pass your lower costs on to consumers. What did they do? Thousands and thousands of costs, whether it's Walmart, Target, Amazon, Aldi's, they've all said they're passing those lower costs forward, and grocery prices have been zero or negative for the past 4 months. That is on the books.
Right, but Mr. Bernstein, I get that. We can argue whether or not Amazon and Target and Walmart passed the costs on because the president told them to or because it was good business. But the fact of the matter is, grocery prices are up 20% in 4 years. And people tell us they felt better 4 years ago, even if you want to argue that it was during COVID or not. But grocery prices are up 20%.
Okay, so let me ask you a question.
Go ahead.
How much are wages up? How much are disposable income up? Do you know the answer to those? You know the inflation numbers. I think you need to know the other numbers. Wages are up more than 20%.
Real average weekly earnings. Real average weekly. Okay, hold on. You can quibble with the numbers all you want. Real average weekly earnings negative 3.9%. Americans need to get an additional $12,000 a year after taxes a year to maintain their lifestyle prior to 2021. The U.S. dollar has lost nearly 25% of its value since 2019.
I think we're throwing some different numbers past each other. Why don't we do this? I wrote a blog this morning on the CEA website where I document exactly this issue you're talking about, and I looked at disposable income, after-tax income, and I adjusted it for inflation. And I looked from before the pandemic to the most recent data. It is up $3,700. So do not just cite the inflation part of the argument. Look at the income side as well. Now, that doesn't mean our work is done. I've got a proposal for you. Hold on. Let me just finish.
I have a proposal for you.
That doesn't mean that because income and wages are beating inflation, that doesn't mean our work is done or that families are out of the woods. They're still facing prices that are too high. But don't just cite one part of that equation.
Yeah. Oh, okay. I've got a proposal for you because we've done this before with a couple of different sets of data. We're going to set it up. You're going to send your data over to me ahead of time. I'm going to send you the data I'm going to use ahead of time. And we're going to sit across from each other on the set, or I'll come down to the White House. And that's the only data we get to talk about is the stuff that we gave the other side ahead of time. How about that?
I don't know what you're going to bring up, so I reserve the right to bring whatever data I want to into the argument.
I'm going to send it to you ahead of time.
Hold on. The only condition, I'm happy to talk data with you. The only condition is that if we're talking about inflation, and we have to because it's so important, we have to acknowledge at least two things. One, not just how much it's gone up, but how much it's come down, okay? Peaked at 9.1%, 3.3% this morning, 0 in the month of May, okay? So that's got to mean something. And we also just have to compare it to where prices and where wages and incomes have gone. And I'm happy to have that conversation
the real
all day long.
The income conversation is an important one. Mr. Bernstein, as always, thank you, sir. We appreciate it. You're an excellent ambassador and advocate. It's good to see you.
Well, thank you very much. Bye-bye.
The FBI says violent crime around America is falling, but is the FBI having some fun, perhaps, with the numbers? A Trump-backed Senate candidate in Nevada won by 40 points. His opponent says he bought the endorsement from Trump. Really? Is that even possible? We'll ask him next. For as brutal as the presidential race is going to be, and it is going to be awful over the next 5 months, the race for control of the Senate will have an awful lot to say about what happens in America. In some ways, it'll have more to say about what whoever occupies the White House is going to be able to do. Republican Sam Brown won the Nevada state primary last night, just a few days after receiving Donald Trump's endorsement. Brown won in a landslide, beating his nearest opponent by 40 points, more than 40 points. It's more than a landslide. That's a thumping. He defeated... He now faces Senator Jackie Rosen come November. NewsNation DDHQ gives Rosen a 74% chance at holding on to her seat and holding on to a vital Senate seat for Democrats desperate to maintain control of the Senate. Captain Brown is trailing even Donald Trump's chances of victory in Nevada. And Republican nominee, Purple Heart recipient, retired Army Captain Sam Brown is with us now. Good to see you. Congratulations on the victory. I just want to clear something up real quick. Your opponent put out a tweet. This is your opponent in the Republican primary, effectively accusing you of trying to buy off the Trump campaign to endorse you. Real quick, yes or no, did that happen?
No, that sounds like the rantings of a Democrat. So there's no truth to that.
All right, fair enough. Fair enough. And to be fair, we've looked into it and seen no evidence that happened. So we'll move on, but I wanted to get you on the record. What do you make, and I think it's a reasonable question, of this disconnect between your polling and thus your chances of winning in Nevada against Jackie Rosen, the incumbent Democrat, and Donald Trump's polling and his chances of winning in Nevada as well?
Yeah, it's there's a really logical explanation. That is that voters know very clearly who President Trump is, and they know very clearly who President Biden is, because we have lived under both of those administrations and the policies of them, and they are so starkly different. But when it comes to who their senator is, which is Jackie Rosen and myself, I'm still new. We just made it through, as you said, with a thumping in the primary last night, and we're on to the general, but there is a segment of voters who have not yet been introduced to me. And so we have got every reason to believe that as we make our case to the voters, to the independents, and even to the Democrats who are sick and tired of out-of-touch politicians, we're going to close that gap and then overcome it.
All right, this is Jackie Rosen on her record. Take a listen.
I have a record of being one of the top 10 most bipartisan senators overall, the top 10 most effective Democratic senators, and the top 2 most independent Democratic senators serving in the Senate. Nevada voters are pragmatic. They want someone who's going to support a women's right for reproductive freedom, to get that reproductive health care. My presumptive opponent, Sam Brown, he wants to take away those rights.
How important, and how I should make it a different way. We've seen how important the abortion issue is. It's why Republicans didn't get the Senate in 2022, in addition to picking some really awful candidates. How do Republicans overcome the abortion issue that has been so effective for Democrats in these down ballot races?
Voters are getting tired of politicians who will lie to them. One of the things you'll note in that video of Senator Rosen there is that was from last night, which was election night right here in Nevada, and she was not even in state. And so as her party was voting whether or not to put her through to the general election, she was doing it, mailing it in from D.C. So that's a perfect example of how she's not even here for us. When it comes to issues like abortion, Nevadans have voted twice over 30 years ago to set our laws, and they did it 2 cycles in a row. I have said consistently that I would stand by and respect the voice of the voters here in Nevada, while Jackie Rosen has actually voted on federal legislation that would supersede Nevada state law. So when we're talking about someone who represents Nevada's interests, it's a clear contrast between me and Jackie Rosen.
I've seen some of your ads show up on my Twitter feed. I screenshotted one of them, but we don't have it to show the viewers. But it talks about how you come from a family of humble means. Obviously, you were in the Army. You were badly burned in an IED attack, survived, met your wife in the hospital. It's a great story. But look, you're an accomplished man, clearly of considerable talent. There's a lot of things you could go be doing rather than running around in politics. I'm wondering why this is so important to you.
Look, this is important to me because we're at a crossing point for our country. We're going to choose whether or not we become a country that still allows for people to pursue the American dream. And as you know, as a small business owner, as a husband and a father, I've got children who are middle school and younger. What I have seen over the last few years under this administration is people who have lost hope, and the pursuit of the American dream has become an American nightmare. You have young people graduating college with so much debt and they can't get jobs that pay them well enough to be able to go buy a home. You have people who've retired and should be able to live comfortably for the rest of their life, who can no longer afford their medication and are actually having to reverse mortgage their homes or go get part-time jobs just to make ends meet. You've got energy costs that are now second highest in the nation here. Our unemployment is second highest in the nation here. Our schools are failing. All of these things are issues that if we don't solve quickly are going to become a permanent fixture in this country. I've served once. I'm not afraid of a challenge. And it's time for me to put my professional life as a business and my family in a position where I go serve again.
All right. It's good to see you, sir. Thank you. Looking forward to getting you in person here in D.C. Godspeed on the campaign trail. We'll be out to visit you.
Thank you, Leland. And if your viewers want to help us out, CaptainSamBrown.com is the place to go.
All right. Thank you. The FBI says crime in America is crashing. Murders down 26%. The streets are safe again. Is the FBI cooking their own books? Finally, we have turned the corner. It's happened. All the things done to address systemic racism and policing worked. Seriously. Utopia is upon us. The FBI released new data that shows crime in America is down. So defunding the police resulted in lower crime. Murder and rape are both down 26%. Robbery down nearly 18%. Property down 15%. It must be true. It's according to the FBI. President Biden is already touting this success, saying in a press release, "This progress we're seeing is no accident. My administration is putting more cops on the beat, holding violent criminals accountable, and getting illegal guns off the street. And we're doing it in partnership with communities. As a result, Americans are safer today than when I took office." One problem with that. The American people don't feel it. It's kind of like inflation with the economy. You can say the economy is doing great. You can say crime numbers are down. But they believe they're worse off. They believe they are less safe. And that's not us saying that. That is you, the voters, saying it to pollsters from CBS News.
Concerns about crime are top of mind for many voters. 63% of those polled say it's a major factor in who they'll vote for in the presidential election.
This could be a deciding factor in some of these battleground states. There are 7 across the country, and some of them have raised this issue as a key issue that will determine how they vote in November.
Jeff Asher is here, former CIA analyst and co-founder of Datalytics, writes an awful lot about this. Read some of your stuff today. We thought it was fascinating, Jeff. Big picture here. Is the FBI cooking the books?
No, the FBI almost certainly is not cooking the books. They're reporting data that's being reported to them by agencies and by state programs. So the data that they're presenting is unaudited and it's preliminary, but we have a lot of other sources. We can gather data ourselves from big cities. We can look at the CDC. We can look at the major city chiefs. We can look at the gun violence archive. They're all telling the same story as far as it goes, murder and gun violence, that we're seeing declines. I certainly have a lot of questions about the validity of the numbers that were released for the first quarter this week, but the overall trend is certainly accurate.
Okay, so there's two things to parse here. One, what you're saying about the FBI's data is only as good as the data they get. This from the Kansas Reflector that's written on the problems with the FBI's data in general, which is a lot of times they don't get any data. In Wichita, Kansas, Democratic Mayor Brandon Whipple claimed in May that violent crime had decreased by half during his term, but Whipple's source, the FBI Crimes Data Explorer, missed half the violent crimes associated and recorded by the Wichita Police Department. That's number one. Number two is cities with highest and lowest crime rates. North Las Vegas down 90%. That seems unbelievable just from a data standpoint that all of a sudden 90% things have gotten better. Glendale, Arizona down 45%. Dallas, Texas 43%. Columbus 43%. Virginia Beach 40%. And then Bakersfield, California is up 40%. Fort Wayne, Indiana up 30%. Tampa, Florida up 26%. That sort of speaks to two issues, right? One, it's regionalized, that perhaps there's been changes in policy in specific cities. And two, there's a lot of data we're not capturing.
Well, certainly. And this is the first time that the FBI has ever released first quarter data. So there's a lot of questions, I think, about the exact percentages. And I would urge people not to take the exact percentages that they're getting from the FBI too seriously at this point in the
Jeff,
year.
I got to run in 30 seconds, but I want to just get this from you. Why don't people feel crime is decreasing? Why do they feel less safe if these numbers are true?
I think that we don't have good data is the answer. And we live in a data vacuum. And so people rely on anecdotes. And if you have anecdotes, you can't remember, have I seen more robberies this year on the news than I saw at this point last year on the news? And so it leads you to be more biased towards present. And so it makes it virtually impossible for people to be accurate judges necessarily of trends absent good data.
Interesting. All right. Or people just feel less safe on the street. I don't know. See less cops. Jeff, thank you very much. We appreciate it. We'll have you back for sure. NewsNation's Robert Sherman has been working on a special report from the USS Eisenhower. He has been out in the Red Sea, out in the Gulf of Aden, with the carrier battle group that is taking on the Iranian-backed Houthis. The attacks aren't getting a lot of attention these days. Of course, they are still happening, as Robert found out. They are happening a lot. Sherman was aboard the USS Laboon, an Arleigh Burke-class destroyer, where the ship's captain received a distress call from a Greek merchant ship under attack by a boat-borne bomb launched from Yemen.
So a whole lot of commerce for the world flows through. Of course. Captain. Roger, thank you. How many hours? Okay, 16 hours left. From Yemen where? Okay. Right to the same ship. What's the kinematics? Okay, hold on a second. Hey, could you turn that off for 1 second? Yeah.
All right. We'll let you know how it ended up tomorrow. Robert Sherman's special report right here on Balance, 7 p.m. Eastern, as he was out confronting, or with the Americans, I should say, confronting the Houthis. New polling shows just how vulnerable Joe Biden is because of Kamala Harris. President Biden's options for replacing Kamala Harris, something we wrote about a lot in War Notes, warnotes.com to subscribe. We'll see you with who our options are when we come back.
Tomorrow, an exclusive look inside our Navy's operation in the Red Sea. Come aboard the USS Eisenhower with NewsNation's Robert Sherman. Watch On Balance tomorrow at 7/6 Central, only on NewsNation.
Reach adulthood. That's why vaccines matter so much. For 40 years, Rotary and partners have delivered vaccines globally. Like here and even here, in your neighborhood and around the world, Rotary is ensuring children grow up safe from preventable diseases.
Joe Biden on the ticket. And stay with me for a second, because maybe we should have asked if they would replace Kamala Harris. And there's some polling that suggests that might help. Politico reports in a devastating piece this morning, new poll goes deep on Kamala Harris's liabilities and strengths as a potential president. Politico writes this morning that their poll reveals just 3 of 5 Democrats believe she would win an election were she to become the Democratic nominee. Only a quarter of independents thinks that she would win. Christopher Caldago is with us. He is the California bureau chief at Politico. Christopher, appreciate it. Great piece. Is there any recognition, right, inside the Democratic Party of how polarizing, I guess to put it generously, toxic maybe to be more accurate, in certain circles Kamala Harris is?
Certainly not in comments that we hear on the record from the party. And there's some similarities when you look at Kamala Harris's numbers and President Biden's numbers, in that they are both well underwater and they're both unpopular. And then it certainly raises the question, well, is she being pulled down because of him? Is she being viewed sort of through the prism of the entire administration and the entire Biden term? Folks are obviously unhappy with costs, with a whole bunch of issues, really kind of a chaotic world that we're in right now with the wars going on. And so it's a difficult time to lead at every level of government. And we're certainly seeing that reflected in Kamala Harris's numbers. But to answer your question more directly, we are not seeing that kind of conversation reflected among folks within the Democratic Party necessarily. And so we are headed toward this election, increasingly getting closer to these debates and the conventions with the ticket that Democrats.
Yeah, no, this is the ticket that it is. And conventional wisdom says, right, you can't replace her because she's a black woman, and forget that sort of implies that the only reason she's on the ticket is because she is a black woman, which may be saying the quiet part out loud. But if you think about really where we're at, Democrats say Donald Trump winning would be the potential end of the democracy, right? That this is an existential threat to America if Donald Trump wins. Not you saying that, that's what Democrats say. Wouldn't it be incumbent upon them to pick the person who gives Joe Biden absolutely the best chance to win? And is that, or is there polling that indicates that that's Kamala Harris?
I don't know that there's polling indicating that. I think that the first issue for Democrats is their nominee, their candidate, their president is Joe Biden, and Joe Biden is at the top of the ticket. We have seen the chatter from the Republicans. You'll remember Nikki Haley, someone who was very, very vocal about trying to make this race a referendum on Kamala Harris. We're not seeing that level of discussion coming, at least yet, from Donald Trump. Donald Trump is mostly focused on Joe Biden. And so at the moment, the public is mostly focused on Joe Biden. I mean, Kamala Harris, there is a potential for her to be pulled deeper into this race. But for now, she's kind of doing her thing. She's out there campaigning to various constituencies within the Democratic Party. And we just thought it was important to take a look at her from a polling perspective and to go much deeper into these attributes and what do people see right now.
I think that's a great point, Christopher, because the more there's a focus on Joe Biden's health, right, the more there's a focus not only on can he do the campaign, but can he do another 4 years? Because Joe Biden today is not the same Joe Biden as 4 years ago, certainly won't be the same Joe Biden as a year from now. There's going to be more and more focus on Kamala Harris. And you think about the various ways the White House has really tried to build her portfolio. Borders are expanding voting rights, COVID-19 vaccinations, workers' rights, closing the digital divide, abortion rights, black voter outreach, all of her many hats. You could argue whether she's done well on any of those, but there's something about her personality. And, you know, she didn't make it out of even to Iowa in her own presidential campaign. She certainly didn't make it out of Iowa. She certainly didn't make it to South Carolina, where the black vote decided things for Joe Biden. She's tried to sort of explain away some of those things, including a lot of focus on, and it is superficial, but it's this is a TV game. This is the Super Bowl. Her laugh. Take a listen.
Apparently, some people love to talk about the way I laugh.
Oh, yes.
Okay.
I love your laugh.
Well, let me just tell you something. I have my mother's laugh. And I grew up around a bunch of women in particular who laughed from the belly. Yeah. They laughed.
Okay, so there that is. What's the plan when the focus does go on to Kamala Harris?
It's a really good question. I think what we've seen over the last couple years is folks acknowledge that these positions she was given early on, the way she comported herself, a few interviews that people point to, did not go as planned, did not go the way they wanted them to. I think a lot of folks, including folks in the Harris camp, feel like these last couple of years have been a lot better, that she's been out there campaigning on the abortion issue, and that has given her really an issue to rally around. As that has happened, she has certainly developed more of a network within the Democratic Party, within Washington, that claims at least, and we'll see if this comes through, to have her back and to be out there sort of pumping her up or defending her. Oftentimes we have seen elected officials sort of thrown under the bus or thrown out there thrown to the wolves, so to speak, to the public, and they're not being that backup. They're not being just naturally.
Yeah, look, that's a great point. And there was always that issue, right, of the conflict between Team Biden and Team Harris at the beginning of the administration. Kamala Harris's folks thought they weren't getting their due, on and on. You know what's interesting? Whenever these stories come out, it's fascinating to watch how the White House responds. And I say that because Kamala Harris could put these all to bed, right? She could go out and do a bunch of interviews. The problem is if she goes out and does a bunch of hard-hitting interviews, or her boss goes out and does a bunch of hard-hitting interviews, we know it doesn't work out well for them. We've just seen that over the past couple of years. Behind the scenes, though, are you hearing anything from Team Biden that they're really irritated with your reporting and real pushback, saying, why are you guys doing this?
What we've heard is an acknowledgement that that they needed to do a better job, that her fortunes were intertwined with Biden's fortunes. And if they really want to win this campaign, they have to do a better job and a more fulsome job of backing her up, because, you know, the fortunes of both of these politicians are very much tied to each other's. If they don't win, then we don't know what Kamala Harris's future looks like as a potential nominee. So and the Joe Biden folks, like you say, these Biden diehards, people who have been around a lot longer, it's in their interest for Harris to do well. And they've communicated that. They're trying to set her up and put her in a position where she can. Obviously, some of it is performative, you know, when she gets out there. And then the other piece I would say is we are seeing them operate kind of in tandem, where one of them is not going out and doing, like you say, 10 more interviews than the other. I mean, or 10 more high-profile interviews.
Well, to be fair, Christopher, they're not doing anything, right? I mean, we did a piece on this a couple days ago. When is the White House press corps? And I applaud Politico, because you guys have done at least one or two pieces that I thought was pretty tough in terms of where is Joe Biden and what's going on. When is the White House press corps, when is the Washington establishment, you reported here for a long time, going to start demanding that the president or point out that he does not do any interviews, and the same for the vice president?
Yeah, I think that's been a constant drumbeat from the press corps, from colleagues of mine, to get them to do more interviews. I think, you know, we're seeing some of these interviews pop up in magazines here and there, both with Biden and with Harris. But this is all part of the strategy. I mean, they're executing in the way they think they can win this campaign. Yeah. And whatever amount of questioning comes from us, comes from the press corps, comes from the public at large. I mean, certainly they have to respond to some of those critiques. They have to respond to other people in the party who are worried and concerned that they're not doing enough. We've had pieces about that, Democrats trying to sound the alarm from within the party. But ultimately, you know, they come back to us and they say, we are putting together the campaign on the ground, the campaign here and there that we need to.
Well, maybe it's tacit, and these are my words, not yours, don't worry, but maybe that's sort of tacit acknowledgement, right? That the more we put Joe Biden or Kamala Harris out, the worse they do. The more we keep them hidden, the more Trump flails, and the more the focus is on Donald Trump, and then it's a referendum on Trump. So it may not be a strategy the press likes, but it may be a strategy. We'll see whether it works or not. Christopher, great reporting. Come back and talk to us, all right?
Definitely, anytime. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. 30 years, the V-22 Osprey, and Boeing cannot get it right. The plane has killed almost 100 American service members. Where the money trail leads when we come back. The V-22 Osprey has killed almost 100 American service members in crashes. About when I was born 40 years ago, military planners envisioned an aircraft that flies like a plane and lands like a helicopter. Since then, we taxpayers have spent $80 million apiece on 400 of the aircraft. They are so unreliable, the military will not let the Ospreys fly most missions right now, in peacetime. In 10 years, in the 1960s, we put a man on the moon with far, far, far less computing power than the Apple Watch, roughly that of a pocket calculator, which some people might remember. In 5 years, using slide rules, we built a plane that could evade Russian air defenses, and it worked, the U-2. Yet in 40 years, we've spent tens of billions of dollars on a plane that cannot move troops from point A to point B in peacetime without crashing. Congressman Glenn Grothman chairs the subcommittee on national security, the border, and foreign affairs, held hearings today on this issue. Forgive me, but this feels like somebody has to be getting filthy rich off of this, and they are preventing any kind of meaningful rationality to this.
Well, it's very frustrating because, of course, we brought in the military today. We had 3 witnesses, and we couldn't get the answers we wanted. And they do investigations. By the way, one thing you didn't point out is we've had all these people die, and it's not in combat, right?
Right, these are crashes. This is not,
Right, so it's just so horrific.
Who's the military covering up for? You'd think they would be the ones to want to ring the alarms on who's ever screwing up.
We don't know who they're covering up for because they are not telling us all of what their investigations
What aren't they telling
reveal.
you?
Well, there are two types of investigations. There's a command investigation and there's a safety investigation, which is more thorough. They will not let us look at the more thorough investigations. That's what came out today. It was very frustrating because, of course, the Congress has the power of the purse, and we are going to be demanding more information from the military, and I think they're going to have to realize that if we don't get that information, explanations as to why they aren't doing a better job, we're going to be looking at this the next time there's a budget. Right now, the program is set to expire, but of course these programs that are set to expire seem to go on or on.
Well, was it Reagan who said the only thing that is guaranteed to eternal life is a government program? But and God bless you that you're doing this work. It's important. This is something that goes all the way back to the early 2000s. This is 60 Minutes back in 2002. Take a listen.
In our report last year on the Marine Corps' troubled V-22 Osprey, which you see behind me, we cataloged allegations of Marine Corps deception about various flaws in the aircraft.
Okay, how is it possible that in 22 years this has been allowed to continue?
We're still having a hearing, and my predecessors about 12 years ago had a hearing on this topic. I think in the past, Congress is too buddy-buddy with the whole military-industrial complex. People do not look at programs, or in this case, equipment that is not working adequately, which is what we're trying to do with my subcommittee, have hearings on things.
Forgive me, Congressman, but everybody has hearings. What's the chance of results?
Oh, I think they're going to either give us more information, or with or without the information, I think this program's not going to survive that much longer.
And yet we have 400 of these things at $80 million a piece that can't even fly Marines from one island to another.
And you're right. Intermittently, they stopped the program. We had an accident last year in Japan, so they stopped flying them altogether. Well, what good is an aircraft if you're going to stop flying it altogether? And you're right. We have to look out for the soldiers themselves, right?
I was going to say there's a lot of families who are
they
counting
call
on
this
you.
a widowmaker, and family members were there today expressing their displeasure. So, absolutely.
Okay. You say to buddy-buddy, and we only got a few seconds, but it almost seems as though at some point, this goes beyond just buddy-buddy. There's real problems here.
Well, right. I do not think the military is as self-critical as it should be. I think there's a degree of arrogance there. We see in other things as well. They haven't been able to pass an audit for years and years and years, unlike every other agency, and it doesn't seem to bother them. And I think that's because, to a certain extent, we need a top-flight military. But because we need a top-flight military, they are not subject to the same scrutiny as other government programs.
Congressman, there's a lot of families counting on you to get answers. Thank you, sir. We appreciate it. This story isn't over. It's been going on for 20 years. Here's Chris.